Hey, how's it going? Today we're going to play some games with Klawf Terapagos. First, I'm going to go over the list, and then we're going to get into some games. After that, I'll talk about where I think this deck sits in the meta and some possible changes to the list, as well as my thoughts overall. First of all, this seems like a kind of random combination of cards, but it did get 3 day 2 spots at the Sacramento Regional, and 2 of them were in the top 32, and the third one just barely missed 32, so it must be decent because I imagine not a lot of people played this deck. I didn't even know it was an archetype until I saw it in the top 32. This deck is a little bit of a convoluted combo, but we have 2 main attackers in the Klawf and the Terapagos EX. The Klawf for double colors does 30 plus 160 more damage if we're affected by a special condition, and the Terapagos just does 30 for each of our bench Pokemon. Now the way we get the special condition on our Klawf is Brute Bonnet. If we have a booster capsule attached to it, we may poison both active Pokemon once during our turn, and with the Radiant Hisuian Sneasler, we can make poison do 2 more damage counters to our opponent's active Pokemon, and then with the Pecharunt promo, we can make poison do 5 more damage counters if it's in the active. So we can do 80 damage effectively with poison, and we can do this all going first, so this can be a donk deck. Bloodmoon Ursaluna is another attacking option for 5 colors. It does 240, but it costs 1 colorless less for each prize card our opponent has taken, so at the end of the game, we can use this attack for free or just like a jet or double turbo. We also have Electrode V to hit for grass weakness. We combine it with Supereffective Glasses that makes weakness do ×3 instead. The Electrode for free does 100 damage for each special condition affecting it, which is only 1 because we can only poison it, but that's going to be 100 × 3 for weakness, and that will be 300, and with the Sneasler that ends up being 330, so we can one-shot stage 2 dark types. And now for the support Pokemon, first we have the Latias EX, gives all of our basic Pokemon free retreat. We have a lot of Pokemon with large retreat costs in this deck, so that can definitely be useful. Oranguru V, if it's in the active, we can grab 2 tool cards out of our deck. The first game will show why this card is really good in the deck, but it also has an attack for 3 colors that does 30 plus 50 more for each energy attached to our opponent's active. So, you know, if we attach a jet to it at some point, we can maybe get a double turbo on it later and one-shot something like an Iron Hands combined with the poison and Hisuian Sneasler. We have Lumineon to grab supporters, Fezandipiti because it's broken, Squawkabilly, great card in the deck. This deck also takes good advantage of Precious Trolley that lets us grab as many basic Pokemon as we want. So if we already have our Terapagos down and an Area 0 in play, we can grab like 7 basics with this, which I don't know, that's just pretty nuts. We have a Briar in here. It says if our opponent's at 2 prizes and we knock out our opponent's active with a Terra Pokemon, we can take an extra prize. We can use this to catch up. We have a Colress in here, also good, can grab our double turbo and our stadium. We have Binding Mochi as well that makes our poison Pokemon do 40 more damage. Yeah, the rest of the cards are pretty straightforward. Let's get into the games. Alright, so this first game is basically to show the donk potential and why the Oranguru is so good. When I was looking at the people that played this deck's list, I was wondering why one of them played 2 Oranguru V, and this is exactly why. If you start the Oranguru, you can get everything you need to donk your opponent's active, assuming all the cards are in the deck. So Oranguru can grab the Forest out of the deck and the booster capsule. We can use Forest for Precious Trolley to grab the Brute Bonnet, Latias, Pecharunt, and Sneasler. And then I'm going to switch into the Oranguru because I didn't start it, just to get the booster capsule. And then we just retreat for free into the Pecharunt, attach the booster capsule, and poison and pass and just win the game before our opponent even got to play a card, which is kind of ridiculous. We are up against another Lost Box this game. This time I did start the Oranguru, kind of hoping to get the donk. I didn't know we were up against Lost Box, but I figured I'd at least give it a shot, start it. At the very least, it gets Forest, Sealstone, and the booster capsule. Overall though, this hand is pretty insane. We basically had everything we needed anyway. It's just a debate if I want to actually bench all these Pokemon, and I do end up deciding to do that. I figure if I get into the Area 0 and the Latias, I could just retreat, but I do get into the Jet Energy, so I can just push the Pecharunt and at least get some kind of damage on the board. I don't know if I really needed to poison this Ursaluna like that. It might have been a little bit unnecessary. Had I known I was up against the Lost Box, I would have definitely not done that, because just putting damage in play for our opponent to take advantage of with Sableye, like now, they are only gonna have to use 6 damage counters on this Pecharunt to knock it out, and then they can put the rest on like Squawkabilly or something else to set it up for another Sableye or Cramorant or something like that later, which is kind of unfortunate. I'm not really too sure what I thought we were up against, maybe like Miraidon or something. But it is the Pikachu version of Lost Box, as we can see when they attach the grass energy. This hand is a little bit awkward. I'm probably just going to have to, I could just retreat and take a knockout. I could Forest Steel Stone for boss and retreat and just boss up the Ursaluna. But I don't think I prized any supporters this game. I can't really remember though. I decided to not bench the Fezandipiti. My opponent's Roxanne is already in the loss zone, and it's just going to become another liability at some point. And now this way, when they bump my stadium, I can get rid of at least like Squawkabilly and just at least Squawkabilly, right? Or I can get rid of Squawkabilly and Oranguru V to just have like more tanky Pokemon and one prize Pokemon. Or if they don't bump it until after this turn, I will just get rid of the Pecharunt that's already damaged. But yeah, I choose to just poison and pass there so that it's like a way to save energy. We just take a prize card without using any of our double turbos. And it also doesn't activate Fezandipiti in case our opponent is playing that, which is definitely possible in Lost Box, but I don't think it's very likely. Now my opponent here prime catchers up my Terapagos, which is fine. It only sucks if they can gust every turn, because then they would win the prize trade before us, because I'm going to be basically forced to put two prizers in play. And I do get rid of the Squawkabilly and the Pecharunt promo. Like I said, that only had 60 HP left, or maybe even 50, so I did not want to keep that in play. I Ultra Ball away Nest Ball and Binding Mochi. I think I'm going to be one-shotting everything in this Lost Zone deck anyway. Almost all the stuff in there nowadays is weak to fighting, so I shouldn't need the Binding Mochi, and I have most of the Pokemon I'll need, and a lot of them that I'm going to want later I'm going to use Stretcher for, so Nest Ball is fine to get rid of. And yeah, just take the knockout. I didn't really need the Mochi. If I had the Latias, I would have just retreated to the other Klawf and used that one just in case like something weird came up. I don't think it's going to, but you never know. The only unfortunate part about the last turn was putting Lumineon into play and basically replacing the liability of Squawkabilly with a new one, because now they can still win with Iron Hands. But as you saw there, they got rid of Cramramp. I really can't imagine what they kept over the Cram, because that seems like a really good option in this matchup. If they're just able to push that up and knock out my Klawf every turn, which it will, because the poison puts the Klawf to 110 damage or HP left, and just being able to shove a one prizer in a matchup like this can be really nice. Like Sableye works, but it's really only giving them 2 extra damage counters, whereas having the Cram as an option would be nice. You're like not losing very much potential, except I guess not activating Fezandipiti is kind of nice, but I don't think that is super important at this point, or not for them to be worrying about. At least I probably wouldn't mind using it here, and I definitely could. I'm taking a little bit because I kind of had planned to Iono, but they only have 2 cards in hand, so I don't really see the need to do that. I just benched the Terapagos, and I'm going to retreat into a Pecharunt and just poison to knock out. Like I said earlier, I still don't know if they're playing Fezandipiti, and it's mostly just to save my double turbos though, and have a attacker potentially set up on the bench, and I can switch like poison and then switch so that I'm not putting damage on my own Pokemon, which could potentially make it a little bit harder for them to do what they want. I don't know, it's more about saving the double turbo, and they're down like a good amount of resources, like 3 Mirage Gates and 1 or 2 Super Odds. So I was kind of hoping they couldn't get back into the Sableye this turn. And now they get rid of the Iron Hands too, which is worth noting. I don't know. I don't know if this person is making like the best decisions overall for loss zoning. I know it can definitely be hard, and maybe they just had no choice, but getting rid of the Cram there and getting rid of the Iron Hands at this point is fine because you're down so many Mirage Gates, but it would be something probably worth prioritizing, just because they took the first 2 prizes and then they could take a 3 prize turn on like Lumineon and then knock out like a Klawf for their last prize or something like that, which would, I think, would be like the ideal prize trade for them. Obviously that is not always achievable, but yeah. So they get back into the Sableye. They don't knock out my Klawf though, which is definitely welcome, or I definitely welcome that, because now I'm able to have 2 attackers set up, and the only thing that they can, well, they can win next turn. They can boss up any of my 2 prizes and knock it out with the Ursaluna, which is what they were setting up last turn, which is why I Iono'd them, which I am pretty glad that I saved that. I figured it would be more important on the next turn, so that definitely paid off, because they do end up getting some pretty awkward flower selecting decisions here, because they need to find Boss and Ursaluna. They can't Colress into it. They do have a lot of switch cards left, but they end up getting rid of the Ursaluna there for the Colress, and now there's nothing they can do. I don't think that they really had, like, their hand just wasn't going to get there apparently. I thought they had like almost 100% odds to hit what they needed, but it turned out to be wrong, and we end up winning that game, which is definitely a worse matchup than I thought, and it kind of makes sense why one of the Klawf players was playing the Kyurem. Alright, so this is the last game, and we are up against Raging Bolt. This is a pretty good matchup for the Klawf deck. It's just Bolt can definitely have a problem with 1 prizers. It's definitely winnable for them if we're forced to put a bunch of our 2 prizers in play, and they can get a gust effect every turn, like flipping heads on catchers, like prime catcher into boss. But they do get off to a pretty rough start. They did choose to go first as well, which is a little interesting. Like, I can see choosing to go first being right in certain matchups, but you don't know what you're facing on the ladder. And yeah, the times when choosing to go first hurts you, it definitely hurts way more than just choosing to go second in the matchups that you want to go first. Hopefully I said that the right way. Yeah, I just squawk away the forest. We do have a second one, and there's no point in putting it on anything. And I do play the Iono. Their hand was clearly weak, but I'm not gonna like hope they brick and just not set up because of it. That could definitely hurt us. I would have no backup attacker, and this hand that we get into is pretty good. I can grab the Terapagos and then Trolley and just pull a bunch of cards out of my deck. That's like, I grabbed the Terapagos first more just to thin my deck out. I was thinking about grabbing the Pecharunt promo, but I wanted to leave that last bench space just for like Lumineon or anything if I needed it next turn. And getting the Fezandipiti is nice with this hand, because if they knock it out, I can just stretcher for it. And the Slitherwing is, you know, Fezandipiti is weak to fighting, so the Slitherwing is really good for knocking out Fezandipitis. They do bench a Raging Bolt, which is kind of nice. I'm going to try and boss that next turn for sure, because they could end up winning the game if they just go boss, 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 and I knock out the Slitherwing. Then I'll be a turn behind, or not boss 3 times, but they would catcher and prime catcher and then boss probably at the end, which I think they do end up having prime catcher and switch cart in their hand. They do, but this version of the deck plays 3 stretchers, so definitely don't mind getting the Fezandipiti just to have the stretcher in my hand being out to it. We do have Arven as well, which isn't the best supporter this turn, but it's fine either way, because I'm going to be able to knock them out with the Pecharunt if worse comes to worse. But I would prefer for sure to boss up the Raging Bolt, and we do get the Forest Seal Stone. So now I have to Ultra Ball to get, like, I think Electrode, or if Lumineon is prized this game, I'm pretty sure. If I had Lumineon, I would just grab Lumineon. It's either prized or I already played it. I really can't remember. Yeah, it's either way, it's not there. And I just check to make sure boss is there, because that would be kind of awkward. Because now I can knock out the Raging Bolt, and if they attack me with the Slitherwing, they're going to knock themselves out. So even if they have a 1 prizer to push the turn after that, it doesn't really matter, because I'll only be at 1 prize after they knocked out their own Slitherwing. This math is also pretty perfect for Raging Bolt. It doesn't activate Fezandipiti for him, and it perfectly knocks him out, so that is pretty nice. And there's the Oranguru. After this game, I was like, oh, I definitely see why that guy plays too. It's just such a nice card to get early in the game. it just thins your deck out even more. And that's when I realized why the people playing the deck weren't playing a very high count of supporters. And my opponent plays the Briar there and doesn't bench an extra Pokemon, just goes out on his own terms, which is pretty funny. We get the Lumineon, so it did end up being prized. Like I was saying before, the people that played this deck were playing a really low supporter count, and that was kind of my first thought. I started like switching cards for extra draw cards, like extra research and Iono and stuff like that, because some of these lists are getting really greedy. But I do see why they made it like that. With the Oranguru, the Trolley, and Squawkabilly, you're getting like a third of the way through your deck before you even play your first supporter card. So this deck does thin itself very, very well with all those cards. And as long as you get into the first supporter, it seems like you'll be good with just the Fezandipiti. The Arven being the main supporter was my real concern, because finding double turbos every turn can be so important. There are the off turns when we can just use it like Pecharunt to knock out a Pokemon, or maybe Electrode, and then we don't even need an energy, but I don't know how common those are. Overall, I think you could get away with cutting 1 or 2 more supporters. This list here, I just cut 1 research and 1 Iono for a second heavy ball and a second Oranguru. Like I said about the Oranguru, it seems really good, and I think 1 or 2 of them was playing 2 heavy ball, and I could definitely see why. There's a lot of single Pokemon that you want access to, and a lot of the time heavy ball is just like a free Nest Ball, because you're more than likely to have at least one thing prized that you want to find. I do think that this deck is actually quite good, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it do well at the regional this weekend. I'm pretty sure only a few people played it, and if only the 3 of them played it and they all got like in the top 40 or 50, that would be pretty insane conversion rate for one deck. So I do expect it to at least do as well as it did this time. It seems like a really good way to play Terapagos. It has a lot of good options. You can switch between single prizer and 2 prizer, and knock things out with poison at key points and not activate Fezandipiti, which is why I personally thought that Iono was good in the deck. None of them did, I don't think, but they went with the Carmine over Iono. I am not a Carmine fan. I think that card is kind of bad, and it really only makes sense in a deck like Lugia to me. Another Colress in this deck would probably be pretty decent. I see why they were kind of afraid to rely on it too much, because Drago can just set up a huge turn, and if they can attack with Kyurem multiple times, like, you're probably just going to lose. But just being able to find double turbos more often seems like it could be worth it. But yeah, definitely try this deck out for yourselves. The first list that I played in all the games is definitely going to be probably the more consistent way to play it, and the list here is going to lean a little heavier into the donk and more depend on like Oranguru to get Forest Seal Stone and stuff like that to get rolling. So yeah, definitely give this deck a try, and like or dislike, comment, subscribe. Take care and have a good one.